The Vancouver Canucks have an obsession. No, it's not ABBA, Volvo cars, or even those famous cinnamon buns you find in Stockholm cafés. It's hockey, specifically Swedish hockey. For decades, this one franchise has leaned harder into Sweden than any other team in the NHL. We're talking players, captains, scouts, and even general managers. It's a connection so deep that it almost feels like the Canucks have a second home across the Atlantic. But how did this obsession start? And why, after all these years, does it still define the identity of the team? To understand, we have to go back to the very beginning. When the Canucks joined the NHL in 1970, they were like every other expansion team of the era. Almost entirely Canadian. Hockey was a much smaller world back then. In the late 70s, nearly 90% of the league was Canadian, with Europeans considered outsiders. But Vancouver was about to take a risk. In 1978, they brought in their first Swedes: Thomas Graydon, Lars Lindgren, Lars Zetterström, and Anders Eldebrink. Not all of them stuck, but Graydon quickly became a star. He racked up 51 points in his rookie year and gave the Canucks a taste of what Swedish skill could bring. For the first time, fans in Vancouver saw a different style of hockey: creative, intelligent, and technically sharp. The experiment was working, and soon it would grow into something much bigger, but Graydon was only the beginning of this story. Through the 80s, Graydon and fellow Swede Patrick Sundstrom became pillars of the Canucks. Graydon climbed the franchise scoring charts, eventually sitting 6th all-time with nearly 600 points. Sundstrom was nearly a point-per-game player, one of the most underrated forwards of the decade. These weren't depth guys, they were stars, driving the Canucks to the 1982 Stanley Cup Final, the team's first taste of the big stage. For Vancouver, Sweden wasn't just providing roster fillers, it was delivering leaders. Still, nothing lasts forever. By the early 90s, strangely, the Swedes disappeared. For 4 seasons, Vancouver had none on the roster, but the drought wouldn't last. In fact, it set the stage for the single most important Swedish arrival in team history. In 1996, the Canucks pulled off one of the most lopsided trades in NHL history. Pittsburgh sent a young Marcus Naslund to Vancouver in exchange for Alex Stoyanov, a forward who would play just 45 more NHL games. Naslund, meanwhile, became a franchise icon. Over 12 seasons, he scored 756 points, served as captain for 8 years, and cemented himself as one of the greatest Canucks of all time. And he wasn't alone. On defense, another Swede was making his mark. Mattias Öhlund, drafted 13th overall in 1994, became the team's anchor on the blue line, logging big minutes and stabilizing a shaky defensive core. Vancouver was now building its identity around Swedish talent, and yet the biggest Swedish connection was still to come, one that would define the next 2 decades. The 1999 draft is the stuff of legend. Canucks GM Brian Burke pulled off a series of trades that gave him both the 2nd and 3rd overall picks. With them, he selected Daniel and Henrik Sedin, the most famous Swedish twins in hockey history. Together, the Sedins transformed Vancouver. Their uncanny chemistry, those no-look passes, the cycle game that baffled defenders, turned them into 2 of the most unique stars the league had ever seen. Henrik won the Art Ross and Hart trophies in 2010. Daniel won the Art Ross in 2011. Together, they carried the Canucks all the way to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final that same year. But their story didn't just end with records and trophies, it ended with magic. In their final home game in 2018, Henrik assisted Daniel on a goal 33 seconds into the 2nd period, Daniel's 22nd goal of the season. Then, in overtime, Henrik assisted Daniel again at 2:33, a goal that officially came 22 minutes and 33 seconds into the game. The faceoffs that night, 33-22 in Vancouver's favor. It was eerie, perfect, and the ultimate Sedin send-off. Their legacy became the backbone of Vancouver hockey. But when the Sedins left, the Canucks needed someone new to carry the Swedish torch. During the Sedin years, other Swedes stepped up too. Alex Edler became a reliable #1 defenseman, eventually passing Öhlund as the highest scoring defenseman in team history. In net, Vancouver doubled down again. They had 2 young Swedish goaltenders, Eddie Lack and Jacob Markstrom. Markstrom would eventually take over the crease, giving the Canucks years of stability in goal. Not every Swede worked out. Louis Eriksson's big contract was a disappointment, to say the least. But overall, the Swedish experiment kept working, and with the Sedins retiring, a new superstar was ready to emerge. When the Canucks drafted Elias Pettersson 5th overall in 2017, there were plenty of questions. Some scouts worried about his size, others wondered if his game would translate from Europe, but Vancouver saw something different. A player with vision, skill, and creativity that could carry a franchise. Fans didn't have to wait long to see if the gamble would pay off. In his very first NHL game in 2018, Pettersson scored a goal and added an assist, immediately announcing himself as the future of the Canucks. The way he handled the puck, the confidence in his shot, and the ease with which he found open ice, it all screamed superstar. By the end of his rookie season, he had 66 points in 71 games, captured the Calder Trophy, and earned a trip to the All-Star game. It wasn't just a good debut, it was one of the best rookie campaigns in Canucks history, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect. The Sedins had just retired, leaving a massive void in the lineup and in the hearts of Vancouver fans. Pettersson didn't replace them, no one could, but he gave fans something just as valuable: hope. Over the following seasons, Pettersson kept raising his game. He matched his rookie totals in fewer games, showing that he wasn't just a one-year wonder. His ability to control the pace of a game, combine slick passing with a lethal shot, and make clutch plays in tight moments started to earn him comparisons not only to the Sedins, but to some of the NHL's top centers. And he wasn't the only one carrying the Swedish flag forward. Nils Höglander, drafted in 2019, brought his own brand of energy. Known for highlight reel lacrosse-style goals back in Sweden, he quickly became a fan favorite for his relentless hustle and fearless play style. Together, Pettersson and Höglander symbolized the continuation of Vancouver's long tradition of Swedish talent. It was becoming clear, just as Graydon led in the 80s, Näslund in the 90s, and the Sedins in the 2000s, Elias Pettersson was destined to be the next great Swedish star to define an entire Canucks era. But the Swedish connection was about to grow even stronger, this time not just on the ice, but in the front office as well. In 2022, the Canucks made NHL history by hiring Patrik Allvin as their general manager, the first Swede to ever hold that title in the league. Suddenly, Vancouver's Swedish connection reached the very top of the organization. Allvin wasted no time reinforcing it. His first draft pick as GM, Jonathan Lekkerimäki, a Swedish winger with elite scoring talent. He also selected defenseman Tom Willander, another highly touted Swede. Even in trades, the trend continued. In 2024, the Canucks acquired Elias Lindholm, another talented Swede, to boost their playoff push. He didn't stay long, signing with Boston afterward, but the pattern was impossible to ignore. From the players on the ice to the front office making the decisions, Sweden wasn't just part of the Canucks, it was woven into their DNA. The numbers don't lie. When you look at Vancouver's all-time leaders, the Swedish influence is impossible to miss. 6 of the top 12 scorers in franchise history hail from Sweden. That's half of the list dominated by one country thousands of miles away, and soon Elias Pettersson will climb high enough to push that number to an even more staggering level. The impact isn't just on the score sheet. 3 of the 6 retired jerseys hanging in the rafters belong to Swedish legends. That's Henrik Sedin, Daniel Sedin, and Marcus Näslund. 3 players who didn't just play in Vancouver, but defined what it meant to wear the Canucks crest. For decades, if you asked fans who the face of their franchise was, the answer was almost always a Swede, and the pipeline shows no signs of slowing down. With Pettersson still in his prime, Nils Höglander establishing himself as a key piece, and prospects like Jonathan Lekkerimäki and Tom Willander developing overseas, the Canucks are setting up the next wave of Swedish talent to carry the torch. It's not a coincidence, it's a conscious identity. Other NHL teams might have had eras where a few Swedes played starring roles. Detroit had its Swedish Five, for example, but no other team has leaned into it as deeply, as consistently, and for as long as Vancouver. It's more than just a trend, it's a legacy written across generations, and when you combine that history with the fact that the organization is now led by Patrik Allvin, the NHL's first Swedish general manager, it becomes clear that this isn't just about the past, it's about the future. The Canucks aren't simply a Canadian franchise anymore. In many ways, they've become the NHL's Swedish outpost. So whether it's Graydon's playmaking in the 80s, Näslund's leadership in the 90s, the Sedin's dominance in the 2000s, or Pettersson's brilliance today, Sweden has always been at the heart of Vancouver hockey. The question is no longer if the Canucks are addicted to Sweden. The question is how far this identity can take them, because at this point, Sweden isn't just part of Vancouver's story, it is Vancouver's story, and with a new generation waiting in the wings, that story is far from over. The Canucks' history with Sweden isn't just a coincidence. It's a tradition that spanned nearly 5 decades, shaping their identity at every step. From Graydon opening the door, to Nestlund carrying the torch, to the Seddons redefining what 2 players could mean to a franchise, and now to Pettersson leading the charge. Sweden has always been more than just a pipeline of talent. It's been the lifeblood of Vancouver hockey. This relationship has given the Canucks captains, superstars, and unforgettable moments that fans will talk about forever. And yet, it also raises a question that hangs over the franchise. Can this Swedish foundation finally deliver what Vancouver has chased since 1970? A Stanley Cup? Or will the weight of this unique legacy become another what if in a history full of heartbreak? What's undeniable is that Sweden isn't just part of Vancouver's past. It's central to their present, and it will almost certainly define their future. The bond between the Canucks and Swedish hockey is one of the most fascinating storylines in the NHL, and it's far from finished. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Vancouver's Swedish pipeline is the reason they'll eventually win it all? Or just another part of the Canucks' eternal puzzle?